Well, here we are back with another week's analysis behind the news. I don't know if you've noticed it or not, but of all the deaths that our armed forces have suffered in Afghanistan this year, 20% of them have been killed by the very people we have trained in the Afghani army. Our men are being assassinated by members of the Afghani armed forces. Let me tell you a little story. While it is involved in Iraq, nonetheless, it's kind of that problem that we see also in Afghanistan. We had a member in Iraq, a member of the John Birch Society, who was training Iraqi soldiers. He said he could not attest for anything above the brigade level or into the brigade level because he only trained individuals from individual training up to battalion. In other words, colonels. But he said that you couldn't trust any of them. He said what would happen was that they would pull them out on a joint raid, an attack on terrorists. But when they got there, the terrorists were prepared and waiting for them. It was obvious that they were getting word before they got there. So what happened was they wouldn't tell the Iraqis where they were going after that. They would just load them up and they wouldn't know where they were going until the trucks stopped. But then when they did that, as soon as they got there, they got their cell phones out and started to tell everybody where they were going, which houses, which, whatever, what town we're coming in, we're going to attack, what have you. So they had to take the cell phones away from them. And that's the kind of thing that they were dealing with constantly. Now, of course, we see the same things happening with individuals in Iraq. They say that they're not policemen. They say they're not soldiers wearing police and soldiers' uniforms with going in and blowing up Americans. But by all appearances, that's just the story, not the reality. That they are really police, they are really soldiers, and so on and so forth, that we have trained. And so that's what's going on now in Afghanistan. And it's beginning to look more and more like Hanoi when we had to pull out of there. This latest thing with the Quran was not smart. Don't think for a moment that we don't have people in our services, be it the armed forces or in private contracting firms, that don't want to blow things up from the standpoint of making things more and more unstable for whatever reason. Don't forget that during World War II, we had over 40,000 members of the Communist Party in uniform. I wonder how many are in uniform today in our armed forces. I have no clue. But I do know that when I was in uniform, there was an individual in my company I did not trust because I knew his father was involved in that sort of thing. And I pulled my first sergeant aside and told him, if we ever get to Vietnam, don't let this guy behind you. Always keep your eye on him. And we had instances in Vietnam where our own soldiers were killing officers by, they called it fragging. They would go by a tent and toss in a grenade. There was a lot of drug use and that sort of thing going on there. This was rare, but it was going on. I don't know if any of that's going on in Afghanistan and Iraq and everywhere else. But, to be able to say that we could trust everybody in uniform, even on our side, to do the right thing, that's, I'm sorry to say, not the truth. And sometimes we don't know the motivation of people. Sometimes they're just nuts. There is no motivation. You can't explain it. But these things happen, and then they stir up things, and it creates a long waiting line at the terrorist recruiting center. When people do the things that they do and it gets on video or the word gets out what they've done to the Quran or dead bodies or what have you. We've discussed that before. One of the things is in this regard, and the word we get from our government about these incidences and why you can't always believe them, is also what the government says is it's also a domestic problem. We cannot rely on the figures that our own government gives us. On one day, they'll say that the economy is improving, and they'll be giving that to an audience out over the television at night on our nightly news to ease our fears about what is going on. And then the next day, they'll have headlines about families in extreme poverty being double what they were in 1996. For instance, in 1996, we had 600,000 plus families, households, that were on the extreme poverty list. That means individuals who have less than $2 a day income. Today, they tell us that it's 1.5 million households that are that way. Well, then I have to ask the question, does the war on poverty work? Well, obviously not. If you're talking about it working relative to hiring more government employees to handle the war on poverty, it is a success. But from the standpoint of eliminating poverty, from the standpoint of the numbers of people on the poverty rolls, and we're talking about the extreme cases here, not just those that are on the poverty rolls. If those things keep expanding instead of contracting, something is wrong with our policy. And yet we will be told that we're creating jobs. Maybe these are the jobs that are being created. But we do know, for instance, that even in the figures of, according to the Wall Street Journal, on these bailouts, that the figures that our government is giving us are not exactly accurate. Let me read you just a couple of paragraphs from this front page article from last Friday's Wall Street Journal. Companies have received more than $10 billion to create jobs and renewable energy by building wind farms, solar projects, and other alternatives to oil and natural gas under the American Recovery and Investment Act of 2009. The program expired in December, and President Barack Obama proposed last week that Congress revive it in the 2013 budget. On federal applications, companies said they created more than 100,000 direct jobs at these funded projects. But a Wall Street Journal investigation found evidence of far fewer. Some plants laid off workers, others closed. Discrepancies highlight broader challenges calculating the economic benefits of stimulus spending. Jobs have been an important measure, influencing distribution of more than $800 billion in stimulus money, which has included tax breaks and spending on roads, sewers, schools, health, and public assistance. So you wonder how many of these things are actually creating jobs. Now, you've got to really put this thing through a semantical test. What is a job? Is a job simply getting a paycheck? Or is a job something that creates something, that grows something, that expands the economy of the United States? If it is drawing a paycheck on the government payroll, what difference is there between that and the dole? In the general scheme of things, nothing. Because you're taking good money out of the marketplace and putting it into government that creates nothing, that grows nothing, that doesn't do any way, shape, or form expand the economy of the United States. The only thing that can expand the economy is not jobs. It's whether or not we are manufacturing, whether we are growing, taking something out of nothing and producing something with it, something that man can use. This is not what we are doing. What jobs that are being created are artificial and doesn't do anything for the economy. And so one day we'll see this sort of a figure being told us that everything's rosy, and then the next day another figure to tell us that things are really bad, we need more money. So watch these things as you read your newspaper and discern what it is that they're saying and what they're talking about when it comes to expanding the economy. Till next week, we'll see you then.